A European nation is quietly betting against the West. While Brussels tightens sanctions on Russia, Hungary is signing energy deals with Moscow. While NATO strengthens its eastern flank, Budapest is blocking critical security decisions. This isn't a mistake. It's a strategy, and it could reshape the future of Europe itself. There was a time when Hungary symbolized something extraordinary for Europe. It was living proof that democracy could take root in former Soviet territory, that Western institutions could transform economies, that membership in the European Union wasn't just a transaction, it was a pathway to prosperity, stability, and shared values. But something has changed. Today, Hungary is no longer looking west with admiration. Instead, it's turning east with intention, toward Moscow, toward Beijing, toward a world order that doesn't revolve around Brussels, Washington, or liberal democracy. This isn't a drift, it's a pivot. And it's happening right in the heart of Europe. So what's really going on? Why would a nation risk its standing in the world's most powerful economic bloc to forge alliances with governments the West often labels authoritarian? And more importantly, what does this mean for the future of European unity? To understand where Hungary is headed, we need to understand how it got here. Act 1. The transformation. For decades, Hungary followed a predictable script. After the fall of communism, it embraced Western integration. It joined NATO. It entered the European Union. It adopted democratic reforms and opened its markets. By every standard measure, it was a success story. But beneath that surface, something else was brewing. When Viktor Orbán returned to power in 2010, he didn't just inherit a government, he inherited a vision. And that vision was radically different from the one Brussels had in mind. Orbán didn't see Hungary as a work in progress that needed constant guidance from Western capitals. He saw it as a sovereign nation with its own history, its own culture, and its own right to chart its destiny. Over the years, what started as quiet policy disagreements evolved into open defiance. The language changed, the rhetoric sharpened. What was once diplomatic tension became ideological confrontation. At the center of this battle is a fundamental question: who gets to define what Hungary should be? For the European Union, the answer is clear. Democracy means independent courts, free media, transparent governance, and respect for minority rights. These aren't suggestions, they're obligations. They're the foundation of what it means to be European. But for Orbán's government, these demands feel like something else entirely. Not guidance, not partnership, but interference. Budapest frames the conflict differently. It argues that Brussels has become detached from reality, imposing values that don't reflect the will of ordinary people. It claims that Hungary is defending traditions, protecting Christian heritage, and resisting the creep of a faceless bureaucracy that prioritizes ideology over national interest. And here's the thing, this message is resonating. A decade ago, more than 80% of Hungarians supported EU membership. It was seen as a lifeline, a guarantee of economic growth and political stability. Today, that number has collapsed. Support now hovers below 50%. Why? Because perception has shifted. Brussels is no longer seen as a helpful partner. It's viewed as a distant, disconnected institution that doesn't understand or care about what Hungarians actually want. That shift in public sentiment has opened a door. And through that door, new alliances are walking in. Act 2. The Eastern Turn. While Europe tightens its circle, Hungary is expanding its options. Russia offers something Brussels cannot: energy security without lectures on democracy, long-term gas contracts, predictable supply chains, and most importantly, no conditions attached to governance or human rights. China offers something even more appealing: massive infrastructure investment with a policy of strict non-interference. No pressure to reform judicial systems. No demands to align foreign policy. Just capital, construction, and commerce. For a government tired of being told what to do, this is an attractive alternative. Hungary became the first EU member state to officially join China's Belt and Road Initiative. That wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. It signaled to the world that Budapest was willing to look beyond traditional alliances and explore new partnerships. Trade with Russia and China has steadily increased. Investments have flowed in. Projects have been launched. And with each agreement, Hungary's economic center of gravity has shifted slightly eastward. But there's a cost. Every step toward Moscow and Beijing is a step away from Brussels. Every veto Hungary casts in the European Council deepens the rift. Every delay in collective decision-making erodes trust. And Hungary has used its veto power liberally. On sanctions against Russia, vetoed or delayed. On military aid to Ukraine, blocked or watered down. On joint European responses to geopolitical crises, obstructed. Hungarian officials don't apologize for this. They argue that national interest comes first, even when it isolates them from allies. Even when it puts them at odds with the very institutions they're still part of. Energy policy is where this tension becomes most visible. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the European Union launched an unprecedented effort to reduce dependence on Russian energy. Member states scrambled to diversify supply chains, secure alternative sources, and break free from Moscow's grip. But not Hungary. Budapest continues to rely on Russian gas for the overwhelming majority of its energy needs. Pipelines from Russia remain open. Contracts remain in force. Orbán defends this not as ideological alignment, but as pragmatic necessity. We need energy to survive, he argues. That's not politics. That's reality. But for many in Europe and NATO, it looks like something else. Weakness. Complicity. A refusal to stand with allies when it matters most. What we're witnessing isn't just policy disagreement. It's a fundamental realignment. Hungary is no longer trying to fit into the European mold. It's building its own framework, one where it can partner with whoever serves its interests, regardless of ideology. The message from Budapest is unmistakable. We will decide our own future, and we won't apologize for it. But Hungary's ambitions don't stop at, bilateral deals with Russia and China. There's a bigger game being played, one that involves a rapidly growing coalition of nations seeking to challenge Western dominance. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Once dismissed as a loose grouping of emerging economies with little coherence, BRICS has evolved into something far more significant. By 2022, the bloc's combined GDP actually surpassed that of the G7 for the first time. That's not just a footnote in economic history, it's a seismic shift. BRICS now represents an alternative pole of power, a platform where Western values don't dictate terms, where sovereignty trumps conditionality, where nations can cooperate without lectures on democracy or human rights. For Hungary, this is, appealing. Interest in BRICS isn't casual curiosity. It's strategic exploration. It reflects a belief that the world is moving toward multipolarity, where influence is distributed across multiple centers rather than concentrated in Washington and Brussels. Hungary wants a seat at that table. This isn't just about economics. It's about positioning, about ensuring that when global power structures shift, Hungary isn't left behind, about securing leverage in a world where, honestly, the old rules may no longer apply. But here's the problem. Every move toward BRICS, every handshake with Moscow, every agreement with Beijing, it strains the very foundation of European unity. The European Union was built on a promise that cooperation produces strength, that shared values create stability, that collective action outweighs individual ambition. Hungary is testing that promise. It's demonstrating that membership in the EU doesn't necessarily mean alignment with EU priorities. That a country can remain inside the institutional framework while pursuing a foreign policy that, frankly, contradicts its core principles. This creates a dangerous precedent. If one member state can openly resist collective decisions without consequence, what stops others from doing the same? If vetoes become routine, how can Europe function? If unity fractures, what's left? Hungary isn't just challenging Brussels. It's challenging the entire concept of what the European Union is supposed to be. Act 4. The price of independence. From Brussels and Washington, Hungary's recent actions don't look like principled independence. They look like deliberate obstruction. Trust has eroded. Patience has worn thin. And questions are being asked, not just about Hungary's policies, but about its commitment to shared institutions. NATO has felt this tension acutely. When Sweden applied for NATO membership, the process should have been straightforward. Sweden is a stable democracy with a strong military and clear strategic value. Every member state should have welcomed the addition. But Hungary delayed. For months, Budapest held up Sweden's accession, citing security concerns that many viewed as pretexts. The real issue, many believed, was political. Sweden had been openly critical of Hungary's democratic backsliding, and Orbán wasn't going to let that slide without consequence. Eventually, Hungary approved the membership, but the damage was done. Allies had been reminded that Hungary was willing to use its institutional leverage for political purposes, even when it undermined collective security. This pattern repeats across multiple forums: delays, vetoes, tactical obstruction. Each instance reinforces the perception that Hungary is no longer a reliable partner. And while Western relationships fray, Eastern engagements accelerate. Chinese investment in Hungary has reached unprecedented levels. Infrastructure projects, energy facilities, educational institutions. The scale is impressive, but so are the risks. Economic integration brings dependency, and dependency brings influence. For a nation historically wary of external control, this presents a paradox. How much independence can Hungary preserve if its economy becomes deeply intertwined with Beijing's strategic interests? The government insists it can manage the balance. That economic partnership doesn't mean political subordination. That Hungary can accept investment without surrendering sovereignty. But history suggests otherwise. Economic leverage has a way of translating into political pressure, and once that pressure builds, options narrow. Hungary is betting it can navigate these complexities, that it can maintain autonomy while deepening ties with powers that have their own agendas, that it can be part of Europe while partnering with nations often at odds with European interests. It's a high-stakes gamble. Act 5. The road ahead. So where does this leave Hungary? Caught between worlds, economically tied to the East, institutionally anchored in the West, ideologically divergent from both. Prime Minister Orbán has been clear about his vision: sovereignty above all else, national interest as the guiding principle, resistance to external pressure, whether it comes from Brussels, Washington, or anywhere else. This approach has domestic support, for now. Many Hungarians appreciate the defiance. They see Orbán as someone willing to stand up for their country, even when it's unpopular abroad. But support can shift, and the risks are real. If geopolitical rivalries intensify, Hungary could find itself in an impossible position, pressured from all sides, unable to satisfy competing demands. If global tensions escalate into genuine conflict, neutrality may not be an option. Economic partnerships that seem advantageous today could become liabilities tomorrow. Energy dependence on Russia could become a weapon. Financial reliance on China could become a cage. And within Europe, isolation could deepen. If Hungary continues to obstruct collective decisions, the response may no longer be frustration. It could be exclusion. Mechanisms exist to limit a member state's influence if it consistently undermines unity. Those mechanisms haven't been fully deployed yet, but that could change. Hungary stands at a crossroads. One path leads toward continued independence, deeper Eastern partnerships, and acceptance of potential marginalization within Europe. The other leads toward reconciliation, compromise, and renewed engagement with Western institutions. Right now, Budapest seems committed to the first path, but nothing is irreversible. What's clear is that Hungary's choices won't just shape its own future, they'll test the resilience of the European project itself. Can the EU maintain unity when a member state fundamentally rejects its direction? Can NATO function when an ally pursues relationships that undermine collective security? Can the West sustain its influence when nations within its own sphere choose alternative partnerships? These aren't hypothetical questions. Hungary is forcing Europe to answer them in real time. Hungary's story is not just about one nation's foreign policy. It's about something much larger. It's about the collision between sovereignty and solidarity, between national identity and supranational governance, between the world as it was and the world as it's becoming. For decades, the assumption held firm that European integration was inevitable, that democracy and open markets would prevail, that the West would continue to set the rules. Hungary is challenging all of that. It's demonstrating that smaller nations can assert independence, even when it defies powerful alliances, that economic opportunities exist beyond traditional partners, that the dominance of any single bloc is no longer guaranteed. Whether this recalibration brings empowerment or vulnerability remains to be seen. What's undeniable is that Hungary has chosen a different road, one that doesn't follow the map drawn by Brussels or Washington, one that creates friction, raises questions, and forces the world to reconsider assumptions about loyalty, alliance, and power. In an era where geopolitical certainties are fading, Hungary has positioned itself as an unpredictable variable, willing to disrupt, willing to diverge, and willing to face the consequences. The question now isn't whether Hungary will change course. It's whether Europe can hold together while one of its own pulls in the opposite direction. The world is shifting. Old alliances are being tested. New partnerships are emerging. And in the middle of it all, a small European nation is making a bold, risky bet that independence is worth the cost. Only time will tell if that bet pays off. But one thing is certain. Hungary's gamble will echo far beyond its borders, and the rest of Europe is watching closely, because what happens next won't just determine Hungary's fate, it will help define what Europe becomes in the decades ahead.